when we look at differentiation, not only is it important for customers, but for our people as well. Because when you're an account manager or you're a salesperson for Netsurit, you want to feel that what we are doing is not only adding value, but it's also differentiating. Our dynamic, particularly in that time of unbelievably aggressive cost cutting, we not only times our marketing budget by 5, but we invested heavily in our differentiation. So constantly this debate of why are you spending money here when we want to earn more, and it's getting that balance right. But it's about future-proofing the business.
This is the Entrepreneurs United podcast with your hosts, John St. Pierre and Rich Hoffman.
Orrin, welcome to the Entrepreneurs United podcast.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Rich.
Thanks for coming to join us today. And I got a question just right off the bat. You've been in business for 30 years. Your company, Netsurit, has been working with entrepreneurs through that wide variety of time, through Y2K, the dot-com crash, through a bunch of different economic recessions and different things. Tell me, based on your experience with entrepreneurs in the industry that you're in, what is the one thing that entrepreneurs seem to typically miss?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, the first thing I would say that definitely took us a while to wrap our minds around from an experience perspective was just managing cash and our working capital cycle. Some businesses, the faster they grow, the more cash they need. And some businesses, the faster they grow, the more cash they generate. I coached my stepsister. She was a fashion designer. And unfortunately, her entrepreneur efforts were significantly challenged because the quicker she grew, the more cash she needed. So that's definitely one thing from a cash perspective. I think as soon as we got a grasp of understanding the growth dynamic versus our cash requirements, it definitely helped me raise my head, because there's nothing like that call from your CFO on a Thursday saying, if we don't get in X amount of money, we can't make payroll on Monday. You can't think strategically or about sales. It just takes you down into sort of panic reaction mode. That's the one thought that I had. Well, it's such a great question. And then if you want a second one, I can give a second one, or we can just move on.
I got a question for you on the managing cash, Orrin. Like on LinkedIn, you have very prominently people-centric culture. And I think the idea behind people-centric culture and managing cash, like they can often be thought of as two different sides of the brain, if you will. Which one of those have you personally been more challenged with? And can you give us maybe a bit of a story and a learning lesson about which one of those you're more challenged with yourself?
Yeah, sure. Probably the one that comes to mind when you ask that question was, as we kicked off our strategic planning going into 2020, we could see that our organic growth was in a hole. It was in a really bad place. We were growing mostly through referrals. We didn't have a strong marketing and lead generation engine. And our two biggest customers, we were going to lose. One, they were going to insource. The other did a global outsource, and we didn't have offices in those regions. So we went into 2020 knowing that we had bad organic growth and we were going to lose our two biggest customers. And we had this pandemic looking us starting to rear itself. So it was very tough. We did 3 rounds of layoffs that year. And the third round, I remember there's a guy on our team, his name is Zaid Patel, been with us for over 20 years. And the way we manage the layoffs, and there's some labor law that governs the way we do that. And we had to let the team know that was going to be affected in advance. And we've just always taken a very transparent and open way when we've done layoffs. And I remember Zaid phoning me on a Saturday morning, and he was in tears because we could only really give specifics on who was going to be laid off that next week. And I must admit, there's a piece of being a leader, Rich, which is we've got this responsibility to balance profits and cash, balance what our customers need and want, and our people. And I really feel the lack of execution on our organic growth, where I failed as a leader in 2019, had an impact where we had to do 3 rounds of layoffs in 2020, which was soul destroying. But it was about the transformation and survival of our business in probably one of the most uncertain times we've ever experienced in our almost 30-year history. And I've sworn since then, we don't want to be in that position again. So out of that year, we cut costs so aggressively that we increased our marketing budget, Rich, by over 5 times. And now we're in a position where our organic growth is the best it's ever been through no lack of investment or trying. So yeah, that's a time our whole business could have debated, are you really a people first culture if you did 3 rounds of layoffs in 1 year? So it was tough. But part of it was really soul destroying.
Yeah, Orrin, as entrepreneurs, you touch on something that I had to learn the hard way myself. Entrepreneurs have an ethical responsibility for the team that they lead. And sometimes things are going along. And so we go through the motions and then something punches us in the gut and we have to make some core hard decisions, or things affect our business that could potentially put our business in ruins. And we have all these families that we work with that we feel a sense of responsibility for. What could we have done different? What should we have done different? So I really appreciate you sharing that story. That's a very real story that hits you in the heart, and your commitment to never go there again. But there's one thing you did there that I just want to call back for entrepreneurs. I remember in 2008 was a pretty big recession for us in our business, and we had to make cuts and layoffs. And the coach that was working with me at the time is one of my dearest business mentors. He said, John, you have to cut deep, just like you talked about. You have to cut deep right now because you have to save the business. You have a responsibility to save the business, and it sucks, but it is what it is. Like, you have to save the business. But he said, invest in sales and marketing. And I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. You just told me to cut, and now you're telling me to double down on sales and marketing. What are you talking about? And I want to come back to this for you, because you said I 5x'd my marketing budget. And the reason why is because you never wanted to be in that position again. Talk to us about why in periods of toughness should one make cuts, but also invest in marketing? How does that help recover from a situation?
Yeah, for us, there were 2 parts to why our organic growth was in such a bad place. Number one, I think, was just a function of the investment. We were not putting enough investment into that. And number 2, our market, which is known as the managed service market, is the reddest of red oceans. There is virtually no differentiation. Everybody says they're different, but it's like there are 20,000 what's called MSPs in our industry in the US alone. Like, from the time we've had our business in New York since 2015, I've probably come up against the same MSPs 2 or 3 times, just because there's so many of them and it's so competitive. So I think when we look at differentiation, not only is it important for customers, but for our people as well. Because when you're an account manager or you're a salesperson for Netsurit, you want to feel that what we are doing is not only adding value, but it's also differentiating. Our dynamic, particularly in that time of unbelievably aggressive cost cutting, we not only times our marketing budget by 5, but we invested heavily in our differentiation. So we actually built an offering that is innovation as a managed service, or digital transformation as a managed service, which is, in our mind, our blue ocean. And we've been able to hire people because of this, and we've actually received that feedback, and we've been able to significantly improve our organic growth. Because in the context of just cutting costs, with no view for leveraging that to improve growth and to future-proof a situation where we need to cut costs again, it can be quite demotivating, I think, not only for the leadership team, but also for the people. But in the same breath, people are like, I had lunch with one of our account execs yesterday. He's saying, Orrin, I see we're doing all of these hires, these senior hires, but why are the account execs not getting salary increases? And these are the types of questions we get, and we've got to answer. And I said to Sheikh, I said, you know what? We built this innovate offering. Either we need to get it to the level that we have to, which is a differentiated offering, or we're going to have to shut it down. And that takes investment. So constantly this debate of, why are you spending money here when we want to earn more? And it's getting that balance right. But it's about future-proofing the business. And we've had to reinvent ourselves again and again. As soon as we think we've landed in a place where things are ticking over, there's some market force that brings a change, or there's some macroeconomic element, or there's some competitive element which we need to adapt to.
You mentioned future-proofing the business. Can you talk more about that for us?
Yeah, sure. I'll start by saying I don't think it's possible. It's an iterative process. I think the one thing that has definitely helped us, Rich, is we have quite a considered strategic planning process that is very participative and collaborative. where we get input from the entire business into the process. We use various tools. The SWOT is probably one of the more simpler pieces of it, where we do departmental SWOTs and that cascades into an overall company-wide SWOT. The SWOT meaning strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. And in that process of the review, before we start debating what needs to change in our strategy, we talk very openly and very candidly about what's working and what's not working. And we have various advisory board members that we encourage to be very honest with us. So I think the one thing we attempt to do to future-proof our business is we put a fair amount of energy every single year into our strategic planning. And we involve as many frontline in the customer face people as possible, because they often see the truth. And we also look carefully at the dynamics of our culture and our people. And we've got multitude of ways that we measure that to see how we're doing. Because we've always felt one of the greatest ways to future-proof our business is if we can find and keep great people, that in turn will result in us being able to find and keep great clients, and always watching those dynamics. And then obviously to have the cash flow and profits to be able to sustain and support the business going forward.
With your expertise in leadership and strategy, can you describe what is good leadership and what is good strategy?
Yeah, I was listening to some of your podcasts and I saw the word coaching came up a couple of times. And the dynamic of good leadership for me is a great entrepreneur who I've always been impressed with. And he said, nothing defines a culture as much as who you fire, hire, or promote. And I think one of the greatest roles as leaders for us is who we choose to let go, who we choose to hire, and who we choose to promote. If you look at Marcus Buckingham's book, First Break All the Rules, and they still have continued that research to this day, where they surveyed about 80,000 companies and about 1 million staff. And the single insight they took, there were two pieces. They came up with 12 questions that if you answer positively, it means your people are engaged. And then the one insight they came up with is people work for managers before they work for companies. So you could be working in the AI department at Google, but your manager's, he's an arsehole and you're not resonating with him and you can't see a way that you can get out of that. You're probably going to leave. On the other hand, you could work for a small 10-person consulting firm and your manager inspires you and you feel cared for and you feel like he really wants you to be the best version of yourself. That's where the glue sits. So that's who you fire, hire, and promote. You often hear these stories. Oh, this guy was promoted to sales leader because he was such a great sales person, but he just had a personality where he didn't care about people and he just was very rude and very difficult. And that toxicity we've seen can break culture. So from a leadership perspective, I think that's one of the biggest pieces. And the hiring piece of that is huge. We use the top grading methodology and have done for a long time. And then from a strategy perspective, yeah, we've invested a fair amount of energy in making sure we do this each year. But sometimes I think, Rich, we've overdone it where we've probably wasted some people's time, and other years we've underdone it. But like we're just over 400 people now and we're growing faster than we ever have before. So we treat the strategic planning process. There are three elements to it in my mind. One, we want to come up with our strategy. Number two, we use it as a communication and input and collaboration and momentum within the business. And then thirdly, we use it as a tool for leadership development because we do a lot of group work and we get people to present back what they found. So we find leaders and we share information very openly. Everybody knows our profits. Everybody knows our strategies. We dashboard all our strategy. We use Covey's 4 disciplines of execution for strategic planning, focus on the wildly important, break them down into bite-sized chunks. Accountability, so we make sure people are accountable, and then we dashboard. We dashboard that every month. So for us, and so like give you an example now, we did our first round of strategic strat presentations that were on the 13th and 14th of December. We said everybody can attend. Obviously being work from anywhere and in this world of us being so geographically distributed, it's easier to coordinate than back in the day where we had to get a venue and everybody around the table. So we had like over 100 people on the Tuesday and we had like over 80 people on the Wednesday that listened to these presentations and they gave feedback. So this idea of people feeling like they were involved or at least could hear the thinking is definitely part of our culture. You could debate it was inefficient, and I heard some feedback saying, yeah, but my team weren't available in that. So we've got to pivot and tweak it, but that's some thoughts on strategic planning from our side.
Today's episode is being brought to you by Financial Wing. Are your company's financials keeping you up at night? We all know that today's small to medium-sized businesses often overlook the fundamentals of accounting and financial operations. Our friends at Financial Wing can help with everything from bookkeeping, monthly closing and reporting, budget planning, and much, much more. Financial Wing's reliable and professional approach will quickly build your trust and turn your finances into an asset versus a liability. Go to financialwing.com/EU for your free 30-minute consultation and see what they can do for you.
Orrin, I'm a bit tickled by when you were talking about leadership, you brought up top grading. And on our
Yes.
episode 159, we actually had Chris Mersaw, who's the president of Top Grading, onto Entrepreneurs United. And we talked about the new book that he had recently co-authored. So just curious, when you say you've been using that top grading methodology for a while, what are some of the practices that you're currently using in your hiring?
So the one dynamic with top grading that we hold on to very dearly, there are a couple. It's connected. The SIDS, which is the chronological. So you literally go through all of the history that particular candidate has had. And depending on the level of hire, what top grading advocates is the longer you talk, the longer the interview. So the candidates, if they were in the beginning potentially selling themselves, the fatigue of the length of the interview, they just start to be more and more authentic. So that's the one piece. And then the piece that's unbelievably powerful, even when you don't use a lot of time, is, for instance, hypothetically, I was interviewing Rich, you for a head of strategy for our role, and your current role, you report to John. So I would say to you, Rich, a key part of our process is that we want to speak to all of your previous managers, at least 3 of them. And so I know you've said you work for John. So when we do speak to John, what do you think he would say your greatest strengths were? And then I capture that. And then I say, thank you. So what do you think John would say your areas for growth and development were? So there's a lot happening in that process. So when I phone John and I do a reference with John, so number one, it shows like how self-aware are you of your strengths and weaknesses, and how accurate was your perception of your strengths and weaknesses versus what your line manager thought. So we don't do references with peers. We don't do references with even someone more senior than you. If you did not report to them, it has to be a line manager. And I can tell you now, a lot of times, that's why even when we use recruitment companies, they do not do references for us. I remember I was very close to wanting to hire a particular candidate, and she had worked for like a Fortune 500 in an HR regional leadership role. And she gave the references. I could see they weren't the line managers. I then asked those at those companies, who did she report to? And all 3 of them, in their own way, mentioned a couple of things that were not a fit for us, unsolicited. And because it's funny how we do ask specific questions, but we also leave it open. And it's amazing how the same things are said about a candidate when you really put the time and energy into doing a reference.
I think Chris would be proud of you, by the way.
Yeah, he sure would. But Rich, if you're going to go interview with Orrin, it's going to be a 3 to 4 hour interview. You better be ready. You better be ready. But Orrin, I love the approach there. And you mentioned, and I'd never heard it exactly worded like this. Rich, maybe you did. Your culture is defined by who you hire, fire, and promote. I think it's a very, very clear formula for what your culture is ultimately going to become. It doesn't matter what posters you have on the wall, what's going on. Ultimately, it's your team that's going to define the culture. And every time you fire someone or promote somebody or hire somebody, your culture may shift a little bit here or there. So that's a really key piece. And I love, when you talk about interviewing people, the look on someone's face when you say, oh, you work for XYZ company. Who did you work for? Steve. Okay, awesome. And what's Steve's last name? And they start sinking in their seat, go, oh, no, they're going to call Steve. But at the end of the day, if you say, give me your 3 references, they're going to give you 3 people who are going to say, it's just a waste of exercise. It's a waste of time. So I love the fact that you guys do that. And there's 2 things so far that we've captured, maybe 3 in this process that you do that's helped you grow your business for over 30 years to 300 to 400 people or so. And what I heard so far is cash. You got to be really wise with cash and cash management. You've been through a lot of different business cycles. I heard strategic planning. I heard people centric culture, which leads to the hire, fire, and promote and who you have. But I think earlier in the conversation, we asked you your first question. You said there might be another one. I just want to make sure we covered them, or is there another one that you think is really key for entrepreneurs to hear?
Well, you took it there anyway, and
Okay.
it was the people one. It's who you fire, hire, and promote. And the dynamic of even my entrepreneurial journey is it was never me alone. There was my partner, Rian, right from the beginning, and my partner, Brian. So there were 2 or 3 of us right from the beginning. Because you have some of these entrepreneurs, John, that and there's some that pull it off. I don't know how they do it, where they start it themselves and they run it themselves and they make all the decisions. So I think that dynamic in entrepreneurship where you can get 1 or 2 great people with you right from the beginning of the journey. I personally believe that can amplify your chances of success.
Yeah. So I think ultimately you need to build a team, right? I think there's maybe varying degrees of that from my perspective. As an example, I think sometimes people go into business, sounds like you've had good success, but a lot of times people go into business and they add partners to come with them, but they haven't properly even vetted their partners out. And next thing you got a partnership issue. But there's no
Yeah.
doubt, there's no dispute that as an entrepreneur, you should not try and go at it alone. You should try and build your team and surround yourself with the best people because ultimately, one of the things I like to hear about as an entrepreneur is you may not be the best person to run your own business. You may be able to develop people that can run the business better than you can in certain ways, right? And that's really important to build along the way. So I'm happy we captured all three: cash, people centric culture, and the power of strategic planning. And what I caught in strategic planning too, I just want to mention that I really loved what you said about look, there's the strategy, but you take it a couple of levels deeper than that. It's not just running a strategic plan with your 2 partners. It's a strategic plan that's communicated and cascaded throughout or cascaded up throughout the entire organization. So communication is there. No one can ever say, we don't know what the goal of this organization is, or we don't know where we're going. No one can ever say that. They may say there was long calls that they had to sit in on or wanted to sit in on, but they can't say they don't know what's going on. And the third part is the leadership development. I think way too few companies do their strategic plan in a vacuum or they do it in a closet and it never really goes through the organization, cascades through the organization. So everybody's clear on the plan. So kudos for that. Can you just be very clear for our audience that are listening? What does Netsurit do specifically? Give us an example of a small to medium sized business and what your services would do for them.
Yeah, sure. So we look after, we have the multitude of industries that we focus on. We're strong in financial services, nonprofit, manufacturing, just to mention 3. Our sort of ideal customer profile is 25 to 1,000 user environments. So if it were, let's take for instance, if it were a manufacturing firm of 100 people, we look after their entire technology environment, typically Microsoft. Our technology stack is the Microsoft stack. So they're using Microsoft on the workstations, they're using Microsoft Azure Cloud, and they're using Office 365 from a productivity suite perspective. So we are their IT department looking after their technology infrastructure. We don't look after the accounting solution, but we do frontline support for that. So we're like the IT department. And then we also have our innovate offering where we will manage their digital transformation. So we manage the operational support, we manage the security, and we manage their digital transformation.